Yeah, I mean, we know the War Chiefs are hard hitters. That's what they're known for.
Yeah, that's just usually that's our mentality when we get into the game. You know?
Yeah, good stuff, baby! Oh, yeah!
Welcome to Sports Review. I'm Jesse Valdez alongside with David Vito. And unlike the Alliance Football League, the UTFL is alive and well. We have a lot to talk about on this episode of the show, including the most anticipated game of the season. But first, let's go ahead and get in that recap, David.
Yeah, one thing that's not folding is the highlights from Week 5. Let's jump right into it. Let's begin with the first game of the day that was between the Spartans and the Wasatch Wolves. The Spartans came out with speed and a top defensive performance, shutting out the Wolves in today's 21-0 win. Next, we saw the Braves and Wyoming as both teams are battling for win number 2 on the season. This week, it was the Braves adding to their win total, getting the 13-0 victory. Also, how about the Space Force? They're flying high in space yet again. They're doing everything right, and today they sent a message to the league in their dominating performance, a 44-0 victory over the winless Knights. Finally, the game that had both teams scoring on both sides of the field. It was between the Hive and War Chiefs. The War Chiefs really came out and found a way to get by despite some trick plays here and there as they came away with a 21-6 victory in a hard-hitting contest. We caught up with the War Chiefs after the game to hear about the victory.
Makes us feel pretty good. You know, we just had to do a little adjustments to fix over the last 3 weeks. You know, we had to change up our offense and stuff, so it was kind of different trying to run it because this is our first time running it this game after 3 weeks, but we were pretty confident. It sucks for them.
Once again, we got a hard-fought game. A lot of zeros on the board, except for this game. Very back and forth. I thought somebody was going to die on the field. The War Chiefs came and played some hard football.
But that's old school style football that people really like and people are wanting to see. And you mentioned at the start of the show, the Alliance, where they folded because a lot of teams really liked that at the start of the year, then they kind of went down the other way. But the UTFL has always had some hard-hitting action between two teams, and we saw it again today. But the War Chiefs, how about them getting drenched on in the interview there at the end of the game? They were excited to get that victory.
I mean, it was awesome. It seemed like a great victory for them. They went into this different scheme on their offensive side of the ball, using a lot. They have a new quarterback. They're using more of a wildcat formation. And they're knocking players down.
Oh, that's gotta hurt.
Again, like I'm very glad that there was no ambulances out on the field today.
I'm very glad I wasn't out on the field today.
Speaking of hard-hitting game, let's go ahead and talk about the most anticipated game of the season.
I think what we have over them is probably experience. You know, we've been playing together 6 straight championships now, 7 seasons. They're good though. I mean, it'll be a battle. I think that you know, we'll just have to lean on that championship experience to get away with the win.
Who will receive the final catch, the final run, the final hit, and the final touchdown? We do know one thing. Both teams will give it their all.
Oh my God!
The Space Force are trying to get this win yet again. As you saw with the fallout, Sam Thomas was talking about they are relying on what they've proven in the past with the championships, and they're trying to prove now that they can get this win.
And I think everybody, if you're going to look at predictions for next week's games, everyone's going to look at the Space Force as probably the underdog going into this next week's victory. But you're looking at the stats right here as I've got them down here. Both teams are going in undefeated. The Space Force 4-0, Fallout 3-0. But the Fallout have not allowed any points on the scoreboard today. But Space Force have allowed 19, so you give the edge to the Fallout there. And both teams have scored the football a ton.
Yeah.
And we talked about it earlier. I think the Space Force sent a message in this week's victory to the Fallout saying, hey, we're not scared of you. And I think they're really prepared to go in and possibly beat the Fallout next week.
Like we said again, this is like the most anticipated game. You got both teams that are coming into this hot, right? Both teams had a very big score on top of going into this game. I mean, I don't know. What should we expect going into it?
And a question I want to ask you and everyone else who's watching today's show is, does the bye week hurt the Fallout by not playing this week? Because the Space Force do get that extra game. They have an extra game on the standings. The Fallout just got practice. They didn't have a game this weekend. That could hurt them going into next week's game.
It comes down, honestly, it comes down to who makes the first mistake, I think. I'm honestly, I'm going to go with where history is backing a team up.
Okay.
That's what the Fallout. I think the Fallout really can, this is the team that has been playing for a long time. This is the team that can get the ball down the field, and they can also maneuver when it comes to the run game if they have to. With the Space Force, I don't know if they necessarily have a run game besides with the quarterback, and I don't know.
The Space Force is a new team too, and we talked about they've got experienced players from the past years, similar to the Fallout as we discussed last week.
Yeah.
I think the Space Force could come out and possibly pull up the upset. And the biggest thing is they do have an extra game. It helps no matter who you play, whether it's the top team in the standings or one of the teams below the bottom of the standings. You get that extra game. I think that's going to give them momentum going into next week's game, and I think the Space Force could possibly pull up the victory over the Fallout.
You heard it from me and David. I'm going for the historic team. He's going for the brand new team. We'll see what happens. Always follow us every week, as well as check out our highlights that we have in between the week as well. Until then, I'm Jesse Valdez, alongside with David Vito, plugging you into everything that matters.